graduating senior. I was the only senior in that class because it was a brand new college, and I had transferred. And at the time, I was doing some work modeling Virginia Satir, Fritz Perls, Otto Sundry, other people with what I now consider to be archaic tools. And when I met John, John told me he had a model of the brain, but it had no application. And I would like to be perfectly clear about something, because I've received some disturbing emails about how I shouldn't be doing this program. And I want to be perfectly clear, because I always give credit where credit is due. John was, at that time, probably the world's best syntactician, and may still be, for all I know. I haven't seen him in years. But we worked together for over a decade, tirelessly. And while there were people that were in our experimental groups and around at the time, John Grinder and I spent long nights. We produced together in north of a decade a body of knowledge which included the two most important foundations of NLP. The meta model of language, which was based on Noam Chomsky's work, and we gave him credit for that. And the four-tuple, which was a syntax and a calculus of learning that allowed us to take learning from one person and put it in another. The meta model allowed us to explore, as Korzybski said, the model of the world that somebody built, the representations, and either clean them up or expend them outside that territory into new territory. And we read together thousands of journal articles. We read together hundreds of books. And when we found something interesting or important, read it to each other. I had a blackboard in my living room, and we wrote equations on it. We outlined books on it. We wrote 9 books together in slightly over 10 years and produced a large body of knowledge. All these leather-bound books up here, which I wrote, over a third of them were written by me and John. And I give him credit for starting NLP with me. And most of the things I read said we started NLP, but we built the foundations of it and founded the field. And most of the algorithms that are used to this day are really things that John and I created. And they're outlined in this book. Him and I bought this book when we first got together, and it has equations in it of one form or another. And it's only got 2 people's handwriting in it, mine and John's. And John Grinder and I developed the foundations of NLP, most of the algorithms used to this day, and the very foundation of it, the four-tuple, representational systems. As we read all these neurological journal articles from front to back, from day one till the present day at the time in the 70s, that people like Dorothy Kimura led us on to accessing cues. People like Paul Baccarita led us on to plasticity of the brain. John and I went and interviewed Paul Baccarita, many other people together, nuclear physicists. We went to Stanford to meet Carl Pegram, and he didn't show up, but his secretary gave us a copy of every journal article. We went and saw Milton Erickson, and Betty Erickson gave me a collection of all of Milton's journal articles and everybody else from the Society of Clinical Hypnosis. We read through and poured through these articles, long nights, hard work for over 10 years. We didn't have hobbies together. We weren't socializing together. We were not fast friends. We were colleagues. And we worked very hard and created the foundations of everything that is NLP now, contrary to what I read. And that's why I agreed to do this, is because the profundity of what we did together is only starting now. We have laid the foundations. We built a calculus of learning, and the rest of the world is catching up to what we did, and it's spreading everywhere. And the fact that little pieces are used here and there, and somebody develops a sales training program, or somebody goes online and starts anointing people practitioners, that John and I have both built large organizations that have done training. that we focus in our trainings on the quality of our students. We want them to be good at what they do and for it to expand their horizons and everybody else they come in contact with. Anyway, that's my answer to your question.
I do have a list of some of the questions, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay,
the one he sent you. That's why we copy each other on emails. What surprised and delighted you most in the early days of NLP?
Results.
Oh, good. I like these one answer questions. These are some of my favorite.
Yeah, we got powerful results that surprised and delighted us. That, after meeting Paul Baccarita, I worked with somebody that had a stroke and was paralyzed and supposedly wasn't supposed to be able to move, and did some hypnosis and rerouted things by showing them pictures of the brain and where the motor cortex was and how one part of the motor cortex was near another, and they regained movement in their hand. Now, I don't know how directly it was related to the hypnosis or the description, but I got results. And the one thing that we always counted on was things work or they don't work. It's the one thing I learned studying physics was that things either work or they don't work. You can be a theoretical physicist or an experimental physicist. But if you're an inventor, you build a machine, and if you build a toaster, if it doesn't make toast, it's a waste of time. And we focused on results, not statistics, not psychological studies. We weren't trying to prove anything to anybody but ourselves that the skills worked. And if we could train somebody else to do it, then we knew it was the skill and not our personality, which is very important, because when I started out, part of the reason I got into this is because when I watched Virginia Satir work the first time, 400 people in the room all kept muttering to themselves, "She's so intuitive," which meant they didn't have to learn it. It was her, not what she was doing. And I found that offensive. And so I started building algorithms so that people could repeat the work that she was doing. And when I met John, he gave us John Grinder, that is, it gave us a more sophisticated set of tools to begin to build the models which we did. And those models themselves have properties that make it so you can use it for anything. One is that they're generative in nature. That means they can always apply to themselves. And the other is they can predict that once you model how somebody does something, you can figure out things that they might do if they lived to be 300. And that's true about Virginia. It's true about Milton. We made better hypnotists than he was, faster hypnotists than he was. And we still built on the foundation of his knowledge. And we have to give him credit for all the great skills he had, but it doesn't mean that we can't do better. That's what progress is all about.
And speaking of those early days, what do you consider to be the most important moment from those early days, the moment that changed you the most?
The moment that changed me the most was when we read Moshe Feldenkrais's book and kind of discussed it and started talking about stimulus response conditioning, and kind of came up with this idea that if somebody went into a state, if we anchored it precisely enough with a touch, we could get it to come back. And we went into a group and did exactly that. And I remember the surprised look on my face and John Grinder's. We both looked at each other like, wow, this opened up a doorway to possibilities.
All right. I think John Lavelle is back. The other John Lavelle?
Back.
Perhaps. Hey.
I got crashed out a couple of times, so I don't know. Let's see this question here. When you reached the point where you felt confident that you could solve just about any problem or psychological challenge with NLP skills, which techniques did you have already found developed by that time?
I've never reached that point, to be honest with you. I don't think we can solve any problem. I think we can attempt to solve problems. I still haven't beaten time travel, space travel. There's a lot of problems I haven't solved. In terms of psychological problems, we provide the best tools to explore how to solve problems. The meta model itself is a problem-solving machine, but it requires skill to use it. And you can't just use it randomly. You have to use it methodically, and you have to keep your purpose in mind. That I've had success where a lot of people failed with clients, and that's based on a couple of things. One is I'm relentless. I learned that from Virginia Satir. She was relentless. She would go on for 12, 15 hours until people were just ready to pass out. And she was just determined to get a result. And I'm pretty much the same way. I just don't give up. And I tried just about anything. And if the tools I have don't work, then I start making new ones. And that's what the 4-tuple is for. That's what the meta model is for. And having the skills as a hypnotist always makes them work better. Having control over altered states. Even now, I'm working on a book that's all about brain states and has the machines have gotten more sophisticated. Back in the 70s and the 80s, I started using mind mirrors and measuring altered states so that when, I would hypnotize somebody, I could know the difference between it, both on the machine and on their face, so that I could recognize it. And when people went into states of creativity, they would, go into alpha, and then there would be repetitive but consistent theta spikes. The machines now are so much more sophisticated, so much more precise that I'm going back to that. And I'm working on a project with somebody else where we're categorizing all of this stuff. We want to take the work of Paul Bach-y-Rita, Moshe Feldenkrais, and all of these people further than it's gone before.
At what point did you realize that you had more than just, can use it in therapy applications, but actually anybody could learn to use NLP? Was there a point in time?
Well, when I figured out that it wasn't about repair, it was about learning. That the 4-tuple is a syntax and a calculus of learning, and I got that right off the bat by spelling. That when we found somebody who spelled well versus somebody who didn't. I worked with some elementary school kids through Manresa Family Counseling, and went into an elementary school and taught some learning disabled kids how to spell, how to multiply, and how to do a few other things. And it became obvious that, we started modeling good salesmen, good hypnotists, that it wasn't about repairing people. And psychology is in and of itself, that whether you're in some school of psychotherapy, they all share the same Freudian principle, which is that you investigate into the past to find out what went wrong. And when you understand it, when you go, aha, somehow or other, it's supposed to make everything okay. Great idea, tried for 100 years, just bloody doesn't work. And so we flipped it over the other way and made it, what about it should be obvious that say, if people learn stupid things, they do stupid things. And if you learn smart things, you learn smart things. If you learn fast ways to do things, you do them quickly. And if you learn slow ways to do things, you do them slowly. And the one thing the brain is capable of doing is learning and growing from the time it is conceived to the time people move on, and probably even further, as far as I'm concerned.
Hey, when you and John Grinder were first modeling the folks that you modeled, what specific observation or aha moment most changed your understanding of how language shapes experience? And what did you discard early? You discarded early that never made it into the NLP core.
The word why was the first thing to go, because it directly implies that everything is cause effect. And we know that Einstein debunked that theory a long time ago. And so the first thing to go in language was asking why questions, because they get you because answers. And if there was really a causal relationship, if the fact you fell in a river when you were 5 really makes it so that you're going to be afraid of water, then that's different than saying if you could learn that in 2 minutes of falling in water, then you should learn to be able to stop it in 2 minutes and enjoy water. That to me, there's a real difference between, believing in people's capabilities. A lot of the clients I've worked with over the 50 plus years were given up on by their psychiatrists, given up on by everybody. And typically they were brought to me by psychiatrists or psychotherapists of some kind or another, and literally told, told they'd always be OCD, they'd always be depressed, that they just had to learn to live with it. And that really is an underestimation of the fantastic nature of the brain. The brain has trillions of neurons in it, each talking to 10 to 100 others in an infinite number of combinations. There's as many neurons in your brain as there are stars in the sky. And I don't mean the ones that you can see, I mean stars in the sky, period. And our ability to have plasticity of thought and creativity, because if you change the way you think, it will change how you feel and therefore change what you're capable of doing.
Okay. So you're taking into account the paradigms and the closed mindset that predominated at that time, especially in traditional professional fields. What was it that drove you to continue, and how did you handle the initial resistance, criticism, and censorship, and what did you do to overcome it in the early years?
Well, I hear a lot about that, but between me and John, there wasn't anybody that could stand in our way. That, we came up against people with intellectual resistance, but their logic compared to ours, and mostly we demonstrated. I've done this my entire career. I take people out of the audience and I demonstrate, if they're afraid of pigeons, then they're chasing pigeons. And, we went to a big psychoanalytic convention at Temple University at Albert Einstein Institute and gave the keynote address. And, they had a psychoanalyst see a client and Carl Whitaker see a client. And we took somebody who had a phobia of pigeons, and they had to bring him in the back door because there were 1,000 pigeons outside. And suddenly he's chasing pigeons 20 minutes later. And I remember this woman looking up from her notes and going, "I'm sorry, I was getting my notes in order. I missed what happened." And that the idea that you could change a person in 20 minutes was inconceivable to them, when actually it's easier to change people quickly. People learn better faster. If you looked at one frame of a movie every hour, you would have no idea what went on in it. But when you hook them all together and run it by, you know exactly what happened. We learn by patterning experience. It comes in from the inside. We build a model of the world that is representations of it. And we store it in memory, and then we retrieve it later when we need it. Those generalizations require that we do three things: that we delete some of it, distort some of it, and generalize some of it, so that we can learn, so that when we see a new chair, it's not a whole new experience. We see a new door, it's not a whole new experience. And our ability to sort those things out and to learn from it requires that we have certain skills, that you understand the nature of how people think and how it affects their neurological change. Because in the end, we want neurological change, not psychological change. You can understand your problems, or you can learn new things and do new things. I have a tendency to lean towards the latter.
Okay. How did you manage to gather so many details and organize all those pieces when modeling the people that you had modeled?
Because we had a calculus of change, the four-tuple, and the meta model to tell us how to ask questions so that we could gather information. And by increasing the range of our sensory acuity so that we paid attention to, it's absolutely astounding, if you think about it, that John and I discovered accessing cues when they'd been around since the beginning of time. And the only person who really noticed anything about it was Dorothy Kimura. She said she did an experiment, where they had attached pictures to people's eyes, and the eyeballs vibrate, and so that you don't neurologically habituate. And after a few moments, the pictures disappeared because the picture moved with the eyeball rather than the eyeball moving against that picture. And she said, and when I asked people what it was a picture of, they all moved their eyes up and to the left. Well, when we went into a class and said, what color are your mother's eyes? What's the first four notes of Beethoven's symphony? What does it feel like to go in a warm bath? All of these things. People come right out and say it's downright important. Kinesthetic, that's an idiom in English, not in every language, but it is an idiom in English. And our ability to listen and to watch, because when clients come in and say, I've got a problem, I've blown out of proportion, they're not talking figuratively, they're talking literally. When somebody says, I have a problem I'm too close to, they're talking about the distance between them and mental images, whether they know it or not. And our ability to pay attention to how people processed information and to be able to keep track of it allowed us to be able to go in and streamline it and reinstall it in them or in somebody else.
Okay. I just have a couple more questions here, Richard.
Okay.
What do you see as your legacy?
Well, my legacy runs over 50 years. My legacy are all the people that I've trained to be really good at this. And of course, a calculus of change that allows people to talk about it, that our understanding of representational systems and submodalities and all of these things, and the linguistic patterns and the Milton patterns, and also getting hypnosis out of the dark cloud that it's been under. When I started, if you did hypnosis, they called you a fraud, almost like a post-hypnotic suggestion. Hypnosis is bad and it doesn't exist. And my legacy is to bring this stuff out into the light so that we can begin to explore ways to get people to learn faster. I think the greatest result will be in the educational system someday. It hasn't happened yet. They're still teaching phonetics, and you can't even spell phonetics phonetically. It's ludicrous. The idea that you give up on clients or that you drug the hell out of them to get a result just never appealed to me. I was around in the 60s, and I don't know anybody who got smarter taking drugs.
Yeah. Let's see. The last one here is, and I know you've heard this question before, but a lot of people haven't heard an answer to it, I guess, is what thoughts do you have on NLP's future?
What thoughts do I have on its future? Well, it's not alive. So its future depends on all of us. That John and I are not going to live forever, as much as I would love to. The people that we train and how precisely we train them, and especially those that are doing strategy elicitation and taking it into new domains, mathematics, physics, coding, learning, school systems, training of the military. We've trained intelligence officers. We've been building training programs our whole life for corporations and sales and everything. That the idea that you get a PhD in poetry and not in sales is always ludicrous to me. That sales is the largest profession and the oldest profession on the face of the earth. People have been selling things to each other for an eternity. Learning to be more precise and more persuasive about how you do that is important. It provides income. And I know people are always going, isn't NLP manipulative? Well, manipulate means to move from one place to another on purpose. And I think it's a good idea that you do things on purpose. People have been conning each other since the beginning of time as well. People have been brainwashing each other in one form or another since the beginning of time. That this is good, this is bad, this is the right religion, this is the wrong religion. It goes on and on and on. The universe is infinite. There should be room for an infinite number of ideas, but we should test those ideas and make sure they make our lives better. because I think that what NLP is all about is freedom, freedom of thought, freedom of things, and the ability to make more of your day happy and less of your day unhappy.
Thank you very much, Richard. I really, I've been with you for a while now, and I still like listening to you explain things. I really do. And I think we should cut it here. I know John Grinder's probably waiting, and we've taken up a little bit of time with technology problems. So I'm going to sign it off here for you.
Well, and, I have one more thing to say. If you want to hear more, come to Florida.
Thank you so much. Thank you, John. Thank you for that.
And I want to thank Kathleen, who does all my bookings, your wife. So thanks a lot. You guys have been a great help. And I'd also like to thank Mike Carroll for putting this on. I know you had a little bit of trouble, but, this technology thing doesn't always work perfectly.
Okay. Well, thank you much, Richard. And we'll see you again soon.
All right. You bet.